Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's coffee talk from Planet Fair. My name is Henrike von Platen, and today I have the pleasure to talk with. Please
Marcus
introduce
Bruce.
yourself. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Henrik. Yeah, I'm Marcus from Novartis. It's great to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. It's fun to have a cup of coffee with somebody else once in a while. And especially with you from Novartis, Marcus, we know each other for quite some time. I remember we went together to the Epic Pledges event like ages ago, feels ages ago, and you've been in events from FPI since our beginning in 2017, I believe. So we've seen a lot of things happening at Novartis. And one thing which is very special, I think, which I would like you to share with the others, is what you sometimes talk about when you talk about how do you actually educate your people, your employees internally to drive this topic, and where do you stand on that?
Yeah, no, I think when we started our kind of work around the Epic Pledge, there was a huge amount of focus on what are we going to commit to, what are those specific actions that we're going to take. And as I'm sure everyone trying to do something similar in their companies will know, it takes a lot of effort to engage all of the stakeholders, get the senior leadership buy-in to those practices. But once we almost achieved that milestone, and that led to us making our first Epic Pledge commitment externally, then the realization hit that we've set a very ambitious goal, and how are we actually going to achieve it. And so I think, particularly in the compensation space, which is kind of my primary home, if you like, in the corporate world, a lot of our attention zoomed in on the technical side of the change. What's our benchmarking methodology? How are we going to display something on our compensation statement? So some of those kind of hard deliverables, if you like, which for a lot of people in compensation, you sort of naturally zoom towards. But the very quick realization was the success really of our work was going to come through the communication and the engagement, because ultimately this is particularly with pay transparency, it's the experience that our managers create for our associates. So the approach we took was a very holistic approach. I think for us, it was important to think about the different audiences that we had, and also not to assume that it was just one audience. So we have a big HR organization supporting obviously a large company as we are at Novartis. So we had all of those HR leaders where we were changing their world upside down. We had our senior leaders that were really the sponsors of our work. And then those direct line managers that were having the conversations, they're probably the group that are, if I was to choose of all of them, that was a critical group. But then also what we call at Novartis, our associates, our employees. I think when we started, we thought it was all about the managers, and then the managers would become these experts that could talk to employees. And very quickly we realized we have got very good managers at Novartis, but we wanted to help them by providing more direct to associate communication. So I think the first key reflection I had was looking at the audiences differently and not assuming that they all need the same thing. But that was definitely one of the first steps. And that really came from, I think, something else that my biggest reflection is the need to kind of co-create with others. So if you're an HR person out there or a compensation person out there, a lot of us weren't trained as communicators necessarily. Some of us have been managers, of course, but we're almost biased because of our own knowledge around the topic. So we really, and from an investment perspective, if I think about the budget that we spent internally at Novartis, a significant proportion of it was spent on getting expertise, with communications support, but also getting kind of input from managers themselves on our content as we created it. So that was I'll stop there, but I think those two things, the audience segmentation,
yeah,
and the kind of the investment in that co-creation mindset was really important.
I like the way that you said you always think at first it's only the managers and it dribbles down. And I believe that's a general communication issue, that we always think that it goes through, but it never does. It's like this like in German, you call it stille Post, the silent post. You put something in these ears and and 10 people later, the story has completely changed. So I think that's a huge communication part, but not only about the communication, but what was it like? How do you feel now that employees sort of engage after they actually know about it? I mean, the one thing is telling them what you're doing, but the other thing is, what are they doing about it now to sort of achieve everything faster together?
Yeah, no, I think particularly early on, our employee level engagement was setting up awareness events, if you like, to and we found that we had kind of two groups of employees, right? Those that were particularly passionate in this space. We have at Novartis what we refer to as employee resource groups around various topics, and so that was an example where we had a lot of interest early on, but increasingly the interest kind of grew. So I think we, we made a decision. We haven't achieved all of those commitments at that time, but we wanted to share those commitments, and we talked a lot about the value, I think, from a sort of like a reputational aspect as an employer to stand up for some of these important things. So I think that was positive. And then we had some interest then from employees to get more involved, right? So again, go back to the sort of co-creating, particularly, we had interest from managers to want to give input to what kind of support do they need. But I think the employee level engagement has kind of been there throughout. It's always been kind of balance between sharing our story, sharing our commitments, but also not recognizing that until sometime in the near future we haven't fully met all of our achievements. So there's a difficult balance, right? Because you communicating a commitment, but then I'm talking to these employees and they don't see it today. So I think it's been important, obviously, to stay engaged throughout. And then very small things. In Novartis, we have a structure where each of our countries has a country president. So actually to hear our employees to hear from the country president on this is a small thing, but it's important. It's not an HR topic. It's not my decision. And so I think that senior level sponsorship also helps because like in any big corporate organization, there's lots of things happening all the time. So I think the context behind why is really important. And particularly, and we may talk about this a bit more, but when you think about the Novartis commitment, it was a global commitment. So you're kind of communicating in countries like the UK, where the UK pay gap legislation has been there for a long time. We're communicating in countries like Germany, where an employee can go and request certain information today. But then you go to countries like China, where salaries aren't really talked about too much, culturally speaking. You go to Japan. For a long time, our managers weren't even involved in the sort of the salary planning of their employees. So I think the cultural differences also means that country focus is quite a key component as well.
Absolutely. And as I know, 8 minutes are quite short, but you talked about starting or doing this also for the reputation outside, externally. Now you engage internally your people to burn for the topic in a way and to fill it with life and to really make sure that it works out and for the better. And then what happens to the outside? So what would you say, how do you stand in the sense of what do you feel that you have achieved something? Do you feel that maybe that retention is better because people like, or that people actually apply because they see things like that? Do you see effects like that?
Yeah, I think it's very, I mean, as a scientific company, it's hard to be scientific about this. But certainly, we hear from our recruiters that this is part of our kind of proposition at Novartis. I think early on, there was a level of surprise from our candidates. Why aren't you asking me what I'm earning today? Or, why are you kind of giving this level of transparency? So I think there is a positive reception to it for sure. It's also it's definitely challenging, right? I think if I'm being completely transparent, the concern initially, right, when we debated about our commitments in the first place, was that this sort of process, this level of transparency, would actually lead to more turnover, right? So almost the opposite benefit. And I think the one thing I can share is that there's no kind of clear evidence of that at all at Novartis. So from a kind of fear factor, which is often put out there, you know, if you're transparent, people will just walk away. We certainly have not seen that. And I think, you know, when I've always spoken to managers, we appreciate it creates a different dynamic in the conversation, but actually the opportunity is to reposition it as, let me talk to you about how I've determined your salary in a very fair, transparent way, and then let's have a conversation about how your career at Novartis can grow, how your compensation can then evolve with that dynamic. So I think I always talk internally about a level of maturity. So that's the real risk to manage, is the level of maturity of our managers and our associates. But I think, again, that's why the communication and the education is really, really important.
Very cool. Thank you very much, Marcus. I like the ending in a way that it's very positive. Transparency is nothing to be afraid of. You can do it. And if you do it, you have positive side effects over and over. So I like that ending for our coffee chat. And I think we have enough cliffhangers in there for maybe another round. Thank you very much, Marcus. And happy day to everybody.
Yeah, cheers.
Bye.
Thank you,
Cheers.
See you.